All right, determine slope and y-intercept. So $500 signing bonus, right? That's regardless of how many days John works. So that should tell you right away that's going to be your y-intercept, which would be 500. That's your f of 0 there. But then we have this constant rate of change, $200 a day. Remember, anytime we have rate of change, a constant rate of change is going to be your slope. And your slope is going to be 200. If we were to write this in slope-intercept form, which is y equals mx plus b, it would be y equals 200x plus your y-intercept, which is 500. Next, we are asked to sketch a graph that represents the situation. She pays $20, and that's before she goes any miles. She just pays $20 right off the bat, so that's your f of 0. At 0 miles, she's going to have to pay $20. That's your y-intercept. Hopefully, you are already getting pretty comfortable with recognizing that. And then what would your slope be? Well, your slope, it says 25 cents per mile. That's your constant rate of change there, 25 cents per mile. We're going to want to change that to a fraction just because we normally write slope in fraction form with its rise over run. So if we want to change 25 cents to, or 0.25 to a fraction, this is one that you should recognize is 1/4. If you don't, 25 hundredths would be 25 over 100, which simplifies to 1/4. Then we just write this in slope-intercept form, so we have y equals 1/4 x plus 20. So our y-intercept is 20, and we rise 1, run 4, 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 and so on and so forth. So we connect this with a line, and that is that. That would be the cost of a rental truck. Write each equation of each line in slope-intercept form. So 3, we have the slope, and we're given a point. So y equals mx plus b is slope-intercept form. So what we could do here is, because we're given a point and we're given our slope, we could just plug in the information that we have and figure out our y-intercept. And it's what we've been doing in class. So it would be -5, right, if I use that point. If I use that point, -5 would be my y, equals, what's my slope? My slope is -2/3, and I know that. -2/3 times x. Well, what's x? -6. And that's plus b. Well, -2/3 times 6 would be a +4, so it would be -5 equals 4 plus b. And if we subtract 4 on both sides, we get our y-intercept, which is -9. And now we have enough information to write an equation in slope-intercept form. This would be y equals our slope, which is -2/3, x minus 9. Number 4 passes through -1, -5, and 2, 6. So remember, we're wanting to write this in slope-intercept form, which is y equals mx plus b. So we need a slope and we need a y-intercept. We don't have either, but we could figure out our slope because we're given 2 points. So remember, slope is going to equal y2 minus y1, or 6 minus -5, over x2 minus x1, or 2 minus -1. So 6 plus 5 is 11, and 2 plus 1 is 3. And that would give you your slope, which is 11/3. We would still need our y-intercept, and we don't know our y-intercept yet, but we could figure it out because we have our slope, and we have 1 point here. We have 2 points, really, but we could use any point that we want, and plug it into our slope-intercept formula, and that'll give you your y-intercept. So if we use that first point, then y would be -5 equals our slope, which is 11/3, times -1 plus b. Okay, so 11/3 times -1 would just be -11/3 plus b. And then our last step would be to add 11/3 on both sides. And let's see, add 11/3, and 11/3 is 3 2/3. So -5 plus 3 2/3 would be a -1 1/3, or -4/3 would be your y-intercept. All right. So we have to change. We have to write this in slope-intercept form, though. So slope-intercept form, it would be y equals our slope, which is 11/3, x minus 4/3. That would be your formula in slope-intercept form. So here our slope is -1. I'm sorry, our y-intercept is -1, which would be right here, because this has a scale of 2, or of -2. And then our slope would here be -1, 2. So we'll be rising -1. We'll be going down 1, running 2, down 1, running 2, down 1, running 2, down 1, running 2, down 1, running 2. Or we could go up 1 and then running -2, up 1, running -2, up 1, running -2. Okay. And we go ahead and connect this with a line, and there you go. Next we have, so here we have a formula, or a linear equation in standard form. So we'd first want to change it to slope-intercept form. How would we do that? We'd first add 5x on both sides, and if we do that, we'd get -2y equals -5x plus 8. We'd divide everything by -2, and if we do that, we get y equals 5/2 x minus 4. So our y-intercept is going to be -4. It looks like we are rising 5, running 2. All right, so that would be right here. Rising 5, running 2. Okay, and that would be the line that you would get with that slope and that y-intercept. Don't want this video to be too long, so I'm going to try to speed it up a bit. Point slope form, we're given 2 points, so what we're going to need to do first is find our slope. We need our slope in order to write a linear equation in point slope form. How do we do that? That would be y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Okay, so -1 minus 1 would be -2, and 1 plus 1 would be 2. So our slope would be -1. Point slope form would be y minus, we could choose any of the points that we want. I'll go ahead and choose the first one. So y minus y1, which would be 1, equals our slope, -1 times x minus x1. When x1 is -1, so it would be x plus 1. And that's all. It just says to write it in point slope form. You don't need to change that to slope-intercept form. Next, here we're given our slope, and we're given a point on the line. Easy. So we're given exactly what we need to write it in point slope form. So it would be y minus 2 equals 0 times x minus 1. Okay, well, y minus 2, you could leave it like that, and that would be point slope form. That's fine. Or you could recognize that 0 times x minus 1 is just going to be 0. Y minus 2 equals 0. So Keisha is reading a 325-page book at a rate of 25 pages per day. There's your constant rate of change. And so she's subtracting 25 pages per day, right? Because she's reading it, she gets closer and closer to the finish line. So every day she subtracts 25 pages. So that your slope is actually going to be negative. It's going to be -25. We're constantly reading 25 pages. We're constantly finishing 25 pages. So it says use a point slope equation to determine whether she will finish reading the book in 10 days. So we have an ordered pair here, believe it or not, because the book is 325 pages, and at f of 0, or at x equals 0, how many pages does she have left? 325, because the book is 325 pages. So we have enough information to write an equation in point slope form. That would be y minus 325 equals your slope, which is -25, times x minus 0. So that would just be y minus 325 equals -25x. Okay, and it says we want to, now that we have the equation in point slope form, we want to determine whether she will be able to finish the book in 10 days. So 10 days, that would mean x would equal 10. So you would just plug in 10 for x. That's y minus 325 equals negative 25 times 10, which would be y minus 325 equals negative 250. And if we add 325 on both sides, we would get y equals 75. So would she be able to read the entire book in 10 days? No, she would still have 75 pages left. So she would not be able to read the entire book in 10 days. A hot air balloon in flight begins to ascend at a steady rate of 120 feet per minute. That looks like a constant rate of change there. That's going to be your slope. So your slope is going to be 120. So after 1.5 minutes, the balloon is at an altitude of 2,150 feet. That looks like an ordered pair. So we have minutes, feet, minutes, feet. It's 1.5 minutes is your domain, is your x, and then that would give you 2,150 feet. And if we keep reading this, it says after 3 minutes, it is at an altitude of 2,330 feet, another ordered pair. So that would be 3 minutes, 2,330. Okay. Use an equation in point slope form to determine whether the balloon will reach an altitude of 2,500 feet in 4 minutes. We already have our slope. We don't need to find it. And we could just choose any one of these points. I'll go ahead and choose the first one. So if we choose the first one, it would be y minus 2,150 equals our slope, which is 120, times x, which is times x minus 1.5 minus x1. And now that we have it in point slope form, it says, well, we want to figure out if she'd reach this altitude at 4 minutes. So how would we figure that out? We could just plug in 4. That would be y minus 2,150 equals 120 times 4 would be your x, 4 minus 1.5, which would be y minus 2,150 equals 120 times 2.5. And if we solve this, we get to y equals, and you go ahead and solve it, but I'm trying to expedite this so our video isn't as long. We get y equals 2,450. So would she reach 2,500 feet in 4 minutes? No, she would not. She'd have 50 more feet to go. So quickly, you need to know how to identify these. This is going to be standard form, ax plus by equals c. This is going to be slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b. Remember, this would just be plus 0. So that's slope-intercept. This right here would be standard form again, ax plus by equals c, except I forgot to add a y after this 3. Standard form. And this right here would be point slope. If you're still struggling with identifying what type of, or what form each equation's in, you need to come to tutoring or you need to study your notes. Standard form is ax plus by equals c. So the first thing we're going to want to do is distribute the 7/3 to everything that's inside the parentheses. So that would be y minus 4 equals 7/3 x minus 7. And I believe we did the same example in class. So remember, it's ax plus by equals c. So we're going to want to add 4 on both sides. And if we do that, we get y equals 7/3 x minus 3. And then we add 7/3 or subtract 7/3 on both sides. We get negative 7/3 x plus y equals negative 3. And I hope that's what you got when you did this problem. Next, we have an equation in slope-intercept form. If we want to change that to standard form, we just need to move the x. We just need to subtract 4/3 x on both sides. And if we do that, we get negative 4 over 3x plus y equals negative 2/3. And you can leave it just like that. So if we're writing an equation in standard form, and we're given a slope and a point, we could first put it in point slope form. So this would be y minus 4 equals 3x minus 1. We use a distributive property, that would be y minus 4 equals 3x minus 3. We move the 4 over, that would be y equals 3x plus 1. And then we move the y over, that would be negative 3x plus y equals 1. And that would be your standard form, ax plus by equals c. If we're given 2 points, we are going to first need to find our slope. So how do we find slope? Well, remember, slope is y2, 9, minus y1, 11, over x2, 5, minus x1, which is 6. 9 minus 11 is negative 2, and 5 minus 6 is negative 1, so our slope is going to be positive 2. Now, just choose any of the points, so I'll choose the first one. So point slope form, that would be y minus y1, which y1 would be 11, equals our slope, which is 2, times x minus x1, which x1 would be 6. We want it in standard form, so we'll go ahead and distribute. And if we distribute, we get y minus 11 equals 2x minus 12. Add 11 on both sides, we get y equals 2x minus 1. Then subtract 2x on both sides, we get negative 2x plus y equals negative 1, and that's in standard form. M increased, B unchanged. So our y-intercept is still going to be 0, right? But our slope increased. Well, if our slope increased, that means our graph is going to be steeper, okay? And it's still going to have a y-intercept that's 0. So there's only one line that is steeper, but still has a y-intercept at 0, and that is g of x. So that answer would be g of x. Next one, m is decreased. M is slope. So slope is decreased, but your y-intercept is the same. So our y-intercept is still going to be 0, but now we're going to have a less steep line. And remember, this is your parent function here, f of x, which is that black line. So that would be m of x. M of x would be the one that has the same y-intercept, but a less steep slope, a smaller slope. Next is m unchanged. The slope is the same, but b is increased. That's just going to shift our y-intercept up. And there's only one line that has a shift upwards, but with the same slope, and that's h of x. Okay, and then m unchanged, b decreased. So we're going to shift down. If our y-intercept was originally 0, we're going to shift down. There's only one line here that has a y-intercept that's shifted down but has the same slope, and that would be n of x. So if this is our original parent function, what's going on? Well, it looks like if we look at our y-intercept, we shifted up 5. So we shift it up 5 units, and if you look, our slope is now negative, so that's going to be a reflection. So it was reflected along the y-axis. And one more thing, if you look at our slope, it's also now a fraction, it's smaller, so it's also going to be less steep. Number 21, our y-intercept is now negative 8, so we shifted down 8 spaces, and our slope is now greater. So that means our line is going to be steeper line, since our slope is greater. So you can go ahead and read that, but here's our equation. f of x equals 15x plus 25. F of x equals 15x plus 25, and they're asking, well, how will the graph of this function change if the reservation fee is raised to $50, and if the per person charge is lower to $12? So what would that look like? Well, that would give us, I'll name this g of x instead of f of x. That would give us g of x is equal to 12x plus 50. So if we look at this, how would that change? Well, it looks like our y-intercept increased by 25, so it would shift up 25 units. What else happened? Our slope decreased. So because our slope decreased, it would be less steep. So here we have f of x, and the domain is between 8 and 12. And that's given to us by this parameter right here. It's between 8 and 12. The table shows some ordered pairs of f of x. Our new function, g of x, is 7x minus 3. And we're wanting to compare g of x with f of x. So what is the initial value of f of x? Well, the initial value, because of the specific domain that we have, would be f of 8, and f of 8 is 34. What's the initial value of g of x? Well, that would also be, it has the same domain, so that would be g of 8. And you could go ahead and figure that out, but I'm trying to make this video as short as possible. It's going to be 53. Okay. Now, if we look at the range of f of x, our range is between 34 and 50. So the range of f of x is going to be between 34 and 50. And I know you already know how to figure out the range of g of x. So go ahead and do that. And if you do that, you'll see that the range of g of x is going to be between 53 and 81. So that would be how we would compare these two functions if we wanted to compare them. Those would be your different comparisons. The function f of x has a slope of 6 and a y-intercept of 20. The graph shows g of x. So first of all, let's go ahead and write a f of x in slope-intercept form. That would be f of x. You have your slope. So f of x is going to be mx. What's our m? Slope is 6. And that's given to us right here. X plus b. What's our y-intercept? It's 20. And then we're going to compare this with the slope of this line over here. Okay, the slope of g of x. So if you take a look at g of x, what's your slope? You could figure that out, but the slope rise over run would be 5. So the slope of g of x would be 5, and this is for g of x. In fact, let me go ahead and add g of x over here. G of x slope is going to be, so you don't confuse it with f of x. F of x slope is 6. So the slope of g of x is 5. Domain and range, they're going to be exactly the same. For g of x, the domain and range are all real numbers. For f of x, that's a line. That's going to also be all real numbers. It's continuous. They don't give us a set parameter. So it's also going to be all real numbers. Which slope is greater? The slope of f of x is obviously greater than the slope of g of x. Oh, and one more thing, y-intercept. Y-intercept of f of x is 20. What would be the y-intercept of g of x? You could just look at the graph for that. That would be negative 8. Okay, so the y-intercept of f of x is also greater than the y-intercept of g of x. And that's all you would have to do. That's what the instructions tell you to do. So write a rule, which we did, then compare their domains, ranges, slopes, and y-intercepts. I didn't write all of it down because I'm trying to make this video a lot shorter than it is, but I told you everything. Feel free to write down what I told you. So write and solve a linear equation using points below form. You could read it, but here we have 2 points. Our 2 points are going to be 2, 194, and you could read that problem to figure out why those are. That's one of our points. Our other point is going to be 6, 186, right? And we're writing this in point slope form, so we would first need our slope. How would we find our slope? That would be y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Okay, and that's going to be 8 over -4, which would be -2. Our slope is -2. All right, so now we have a point and we have our slope, so let's go ahead and plug it into our point slope format. Y minus y1, which I'll just go ahead and use the first point. Y1 would be 194, equals our slope, which is -2, times x minus x1, so x minus 2. And we have it in point slope form. Now we're trying to figure out what Jeff's weight would be after 12 weeks. After 12 weeks, so we'll plug that in for our x. That would be y minus 194 equals -2 times 12 minus 2. Well, 12 minus 2 is 10, and 10 times -2 is 10 times -2 is -20. So that would be y minus 2, y minus 194, I'm sorry, equals -20. And then we add 194 on both sides of our equation, and we get our answer, which is y equals 174 pounds. He would be 174 pounds after 12 weeks. Landscape supply business charges $35 to deliver more mulch. The cost of the mulch is $29 per cubic yard. So we are trying to write an equation in slope-intercept form. So it looks like our y-intercept is going to be 35, right? And I hope you could figure that out. That's what they charge just to deliver it. But then their constant rate of change there is going to be, well, how much does it cost per cubic yard? And that's $29 per cubic yard. So your slope is going to be 29. Okay. So this is just going to be y equals 20, and that's not a -29. That's your slope is 29. Y equals 29x plus 35. All right, and then we're trying to find the cost of having 6 cubic yards of mulch delivered. So we are going to go ahead and plug in 6 for x. So that's going to be y equals 29 times 6 plus 35. And if we do that, we get our answer, which is y equals 209. It costs $209. All right, really quick, the last ones. Write the following forms of a linear equation: slope-intercept form. That's going to be y equals mx plus b. You should know that by now. Standard form is going to be ax plus by equals c. And point slope form is going to be y minus y1 equals your slope times x minus x1. That's it. Have a great day. Get ready, study for your test tomorrow. See you tomorrow.